Welcome back everybody, my name's Nick930 and this is my review for the recently released Far Cry New Dawn. Far Cry New Dawn is a brand new standalone expansion to last year's open world shooter game Far Cry 5. In New Dawn, players will explore the remnants of Hope County, 17 years after a nuclear war. Unlike most post-apocalyptic video games, New Dawn's setting isn't a desolate dry wasteland of smoke and ash, but rather an explosion of color and life. Players will venture out into this colorful new rendition of the valley and fight bandits, recover resources, and build a sanctuary to help piece society back together. New Dawn takes advantage of this colossal shift in its narrative direction to also present some major changes to the Far Cry gameplay loop, with new RPG-esque elements to enemies and weapons, in addition to a larger focus on resource gathering and crafting. But before we get into all those details, let's first talk about the story. Far Cry New Dawn takes place after the events of Far Cry 5, where a nuclear war has destroyed most of the United States. After the radiation and nuclear fallout starts to subside, new life blossoms in an extraordinary event called a super bloom. The human survivors also begin to bounce back, with the strongest communities spreading their knowledge of how to recover from the devastation. One such community, led by a Thomas Rush, attempts to help Hope County rebuild, but is ambushed by a dangerous gang of scavengers called the Highwaymen, who fancy themselves motocross gear and colorful spray paint to mark their territory. The Highwaymen are led by twin sisters, Mickey and Lou, who are just as deranged and intimidating as you'd expect from a Far Cry lead antagonist. After the Highwaymen execute a member of Rush's security team, an unnamed security captain escapes and manages to regroup with the survivors of Hope County in a safe haven known as Prosperity. The player assumes the role of this unnamed captain, as they help Kim Ray and her allies bolster Prosperity's strength and fight back against the occupying Highwaymen forces. It's here where a bulk of the gameplay loop takes place, as players are tasked with disrupting enemy outposts, stealing resources, and saving allies to help take back Hope County. The plot starts off straightforward, and I love the performances from the main cast, especially the Ray family and the twin antagonist, but it doesn't really get interesting until the second and third act, where another plot element is thrown into the picture that I'd rather not spoil. Everything else is your run-of-the-mill post-apocalypse survival story, with people handling the situation in their own crazy, messed-up ways, and you just dealing with their nonsense. It's fun catching up with characters like Nick, Gracie, and Herc, but at the same time, they weren't all that memorable in Far Cry 5, so the novelty wears off quickly. If you were interested in the story of Far Cry 5, you'll likely enjoy the narrative in New Dawn. It expands on the crazy setup from Far Cry 5's ending, and helps provide some much-needed closure, while also providing an interesting look into how society would function after an event of this magnitude. But the real change in Far Cry New Dawn comes with its gameplay. While the core gameplay design of Far Cry 5 is still here, the gameplay loop has been redesigned to imitate the style of an RPG game, with a focus on finding loot, upgrading facilities, and equipping more powerful gear to deal with tougher enemies. In order to progress through the game, players will need to consistently upgrade all of these fields in order to stand a chance against the enemy. Perks handle about the same as they did in Far Cry 5, with perk points being used to purchase various abilities like increased ammo capacity or extra holsters, and more points being awarded for completing challenges. But new to New Dawn is the base upgrade system. Players will need to upgrade various facilities at Prosperity with collected ethanol. To earn ethanol, players will have to capture enemy outposts, with stealthier approaches awarding bonus amounts to speed up the progression. Ethanol can then be spent from the menu to upgrade various aspects of your home base. These upgrades include improving your weapons workbench, your garden, or the infirmary. Each aspect of the base that's upgraded will have a direct impact on your character's abilities, with upgrades to the infirmary boosting your maximum health, or upgrades to the weapon bench granting you access to more powerful weapons. To obtain new weapons, you'll need to either steal them temporarily off of dead enemies, or craft them with available resources that can be found all throughout the game. This is where the game can get a bit grindy, and often feels like it's pushing the player strongly towards the built-in microtransactions to help speed up the process. Each weapon requires a lot of resources to craft, and progressing further in the game requires that you craft more powerful weapons just to stand a chance against the more powerful enemies. Unlike past Far Cry games where even the weakest weapons would still be able to kill enemies with a few shots, New Dawn has artificial health bars for its different enemy tiers, with higher tier enemies being near impossible to kill with the low tier weapons. It's not necessarily a long grind, as you'll be able to obtain the necessary resources for anything you really want just by exploring the world at a normal pace, but it just feels out of place in the series and really hurts the sandbox nature of the experience. I felt limited by the few weapons and vehicles I had managed to craft, and forced to repeat outposts or explore old locations just to venture further in the world. I never felt restricted by this in the past. I also was disappointed with the level of customization available for the weapons. Rather than letting players craft base weapons and add attachments at will, each weapon comes equipped with preset attachments that can't be changed. The world of post-apocalypse Hope County is roughly the same as it was in Far Cry 5, with bands of enemies driving on the main roads, small patrols walking through the woods, and cougars attacking you every 10 seconds. Outposts are less common than the main Far Cry titles, but can be replayed for increased challenge and more valuable ethanol rewards. Other returning elements include fishing, hunting, and flying, but a bulk of your gameplay experience will still be sneaking around enemy outposts and killing guys in paintball masks. When you grow tired of the high-contrast version of Hope County, you can always go on expeditions, which are small side missions that take place in unique environments across the country, like a desert bridge or an abandoned aircraft carrier. These missions are simple, linear levels, and all have the same objective of reaching a package, rushing to an extraction point, and killing waves of enemies as you wait to be rescued. They're a fun distraction, and can also provide the player with extra resources to help craft new items. But I also felt like I was just playing some custom-made arcade levels from Far Cry 5. A feature that, unfortunately, was not carried over into New Dawn. To progress in the story, players need to complete main objectives, meet up with important characters, and upgrade prosperity. The experience is surprisingly short, taking only around 15 to 17 hours to complete with a standard playthrough, but grinding for the more powerful weapons and exploring the large environment can easily push that time out further. And if you're feeling lonely, you can always have a friend drop in and play in online co-op, which feels right at home with the various two-seater vehicles and contextual button interactions that require long waits. I'm personally more of a fan of the solo Far Cry experience, and I already voiced my concerns about this back when I reviewed Far Cry 5 last year, but I can see why this feature would be appealing. Visually, Far Cry New Dawn looks beautiful. I love the unique Super Bloom setting mixed with a sort of Warriors vibe to the enemies. The high contrast and pretty pink flowers may seem off-putting, especially to fans that are more accustomed to the realistic presentation in the Far Cry series, but considering this whole game feels more lighthearted and experimental, I think this was the one change that works really well. Rather than spending all the time and resources building an entirely new environment, Ubisoft recycled Far Cry 5's map, covered some of the structures up with dirt mounds, and painted everything pink. Even though Far Cry 5 only came out last year, I still found it interesting to find myself in familiar locations and see how they transformed with time. Each area of the game has been reworked with new structures, new variations of creatures, and an interesting art direction. On the performance side, the game runs about the same as Far Cry 5, with the performance occasionally getting iffy with the more complex environments and various effects, but still plenty playable all throughout. Overall, Far Cry New Dawn is not a bad game. Yes, Ubisoft recycled their assets, and you could argue that they just gave Far Cry 5 a new coat of paint, but there's still a lot more that went into this game that help it feel like a fresh experience. I don't mind the reworked environment or even the crazy storyline as much, and I found it to be pretty entertaining. But I'm not a fan of the reworked weapon balancing. It feels like a really sneaky way to implement more microtransactions into the experience. Far Cry is at its best when the game encourages exploration and weapon experimentation. Tackling enemy positions from different angles and finding the cleanest approach to tackle objectives has always been at the core of the Far Cry formula, and I feel that New Dawn would have been better had it stuck to the tried and true design. The environment is gorgeous and the story is decent enough to keep me engaged, but the gameplay changes seemed a bit questionable. But what do you guys think? Do you like this change for the Far Cry series? Let me know in the comments section. Also, be sure to check out my direct comparison of Far Cry New Dawn to last year's Far Cry 5. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos posted every week.